what was the actual plan for bringing down the force field in the third quarter quell? Because Katniss wasn't supposed to be the one to destroy it. This is all going off of book canon, by the way. The movie handled the mechanics of the force field and the series of events differently. So there was a plan to break everyone out of the arena 3 months before the games, which is when the victor theme was announced. The victor tributes from 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 11 had varying degrees of knowledge about it. So that's 6 districts plus Haymitch from 12 in on it. An undercover group aiming to overthrow the Capitol, which includes Plutarch, were putting this plan together, which all revolved around blowing a hole in the force field. Beatty's role was to use wire, which Plutarch ensured would be in the cornucopia of weapons to do this. In order to communicate when he should blow the force field so they could be rescued, the victor tributes in on it received bread rolls, which served as a code. The district where the bread originated indicated the day, 3. The number of rolls, the hour, 24. They would be rescued using a hovercraft from District 13. Finnick said that all of the victor tributes agreed to die to keep Katniss alive so that she could be rescued from the arena and be the face of the revolution. The victor tributes also fought to keep Peeta alive because if he died, Katniss would ditch her allies and they wouldn't be able to protect her. Plus, it would be a mess since then she wouldn't be in the right place at the right time to get rescued. They wouldn't be around to cut her tracker out. It'd be tough. We don't know exactly what all the other victor tributes plan to do in terms of the rescue. As in, if the people who were still alive but not with the group protecting Katniss when the force field went down, like would the hovercraft attempt to rescue them also? It seems possible given that Chaff was nearby the lightning tree, so maybe he knew to go there. Unfortunately, he died before he could be rescued though. So it seems like there were 2 rebel alliance groups separated by which ones were meant to publicly ally with Katniss. It would just be too suspicious to the Capitol if half of the tributes formed a big alliance. And given what we learned in the prequels about some previous games, these big alliances would raise red flags. By the way, this part isn't explicitly said, so I'm making inferences here. So I infer that the public alliance was intended to be districts 3, 4, 7, and 12. And this public alliance was initially divided into 2 groups with plans to meet up eventually. It would be very difficult to all get together amidst the chaos of the start of the games, plus Katniss would be very reluctant to ally with all these other people right off the bat, so it makes sense she's starting off just with Mags and Finnick. Katniss expressed earlier that she would be willing to ally with Mags, Wyrus, and Beetee, but ultimately tells Peeta she doesn't want any allies. The most valuable person in this alliance, aside from Katniss and Peeta, was Beetee, since he would blow the hole in the force field. Finnick, Joanna, and Blight were designated bodyguards, basically. We don't know much about Blight, to be honest. He dies early on, but obviously Finnick and Joanna were skilled fighters, while Beetee, Wyrus, and Mags were not. Mags could have been skilled in her heyday, but she's old. Since Mags was Finnick's district partner and Katniss liked Mags, he was tapped to initiate an alliance with Katniss and Peeta as soon as possible and help protect them. Haymitch also gave Finnick his golden bangle to signal to Katniss and Peeta that they can trust him and be his ally. I figured that Joanna, Blight, Beetee, and Wyrus were told to ally with each other as soon as possible also, with the goal to protect Beetee and get him that coil of wire. Then these 2 ally groups would try to find each other and join forces. For all of this, they'd have to be flexible for the ally pairing since so much can go wrong in the arena. In terms of the bread roll code, Finnick and Beetee definitely knew about it. I'm not sure about Joanna or the others. When the group is still just Finnick, Katniss, and Peeta, they receive a parachute with a loaf of bread from District 4. Finnick closely examines this loaf of bread when it's delivered, secretly wondering if it's part of the code system, based on his behavior. It's not though, it's just a loaf to eat. Later, once the surviving alliance is Joanna, Katniss, Peeta, Finnick, and Beetee, they get the bread rolls. They're District 3's signature bite-sized, square-shaped rolls. When they get them, Beetee asks how many there are, and Finnick counts them while also carefully examining them. It seems like Finnick wasn't told the whole thing about how the code worked, just that bread would be used to communicate with them. It's like he's looking for a message carved into the bread. Whereas Beetee knows what's up. He immediately asks how many rolls there are and confirms there's 24. Katniss and Peeta weren't told about the plan because once the force field blew, they would be the first ones the Capitol tried to capture. And if they were captured, they would be tortured for information, so the less they knew, the safer they'd be, hopefully. Beetee needed to construct this wire trap, but obviously he couldn't let on that his intention was to blow up the force field, so he comes up with a lie that this trap is meant to kill the careers in order to cover it up. The mechanics of the plan are to spread the wire from the lightning tree all the way to the big saltwater pool beach in the hours between noon and midnight. When the midnight lightning strike hits, the electricity will travel down the wire and into not only the water, but also the surrounding beach. It will act something like a fuse. So he's trying to harness all that electricity and lies and says the purpose is to electrocute the careers, which will be on the beach. And if they're not on the beach, it would at least wipe out all of the seafood, eliminating a valuable food supply. The lightning tree is about 15 yards away from the force field. Finnick guards Beatty while he examines the tree. When they start actually setting up the wire, Beatty unrolls a bunch of it and has Finnick secure it tightly around a broken branch and lay it on the ground. And then they wrap the tree trunk with more wire in a deliberate pattern. This smaller branch is serving as a mini spool, kept around to be used later for the rebel part of the plan. Katniss and Joanna are tasked with running the wire to the beach and told to go to the tree in the 1 to 2 o'clock sector. So that must be the intended rendezvous point for rescue, at least for them. Beatty's plan was to take that wire they wrapped around the broken branch and wrap it around a knife and throw it at the weak spot in the force field, the shimmering chink in the armor. It doesn't appear that this needs to be done at the same moment the lightning hits. The knife can go through the weak spot and the wire will still be there, connecting from the knife through the force field and to the tree. And then once the lightning hits, the contact with the wire will blow out the force field. So it's almost like that weak spot is a little doggy door. Having the wire in the salt water and the beach isn't necessary for the rebel plan. It's just the cover-up fake plan of hurting the careers. The lightning tree, knife, and wire can get the real job done. There's another layer to the plan with the trackers in everyone's arms. Finnick, Joanna, and Beatty all know the trackers need to be cut out. We don't get the full story on that plan, and things get all messed up because the careers show up. But I imagine that the plan was for Joanna to pretend to turn on Katniss once they got to the rendezvous point, catching her by surprise, knocking her out, and cutting out the tracker, much like we see her do, but I think she was supposed to do it later. Finnick would do the same for Peeta, and something similar with Beatty. Then Finnick and Joanna would quickly cut out their own trackers or do each other's in time for the force field bursting and the rescue hovercraft to fly in. I don't think it was an option to just suddenly cut out their own trackers. They needed this cover up that it was happening because they were turning on each other and attacking. But things go wrong when the careers cut the wire and attack. Joanna makes the split-second decision to fake turn on Katniss and make it seem like she's dead, so the careers leave Katniss alone and follow her instead. Peeta, Finnick, and Beatty are all aware of the wire being cut, so they know something is wrong. Peeta runs to find Katniss, and soon after he left, it seems that Finnick cut out Beatty's tracker and then ran off to find Katniss. Beatty stays to finish setting up the trap. With the combination of chaos and blood loss from the tracker removal, Beatty misses when he rushes to thrust the knife through the weak spot of the force field. It's also possible he missed because the careers showed up and he's dodging an attack from them. I don't think Finnick took out Beatty's tracker after he was electrocuted, because if that happened, Finnick would know they were kind of screwed. So it wouldn't make sense to bother taking out Beatty's tracker if the force field wasn't gonna break, right? Katniss just finds Beatty passed out on the ground, his arm bleeding, and he's holding that knife. The wire around it is still attached to the tree, and Katniss deduces that he had tried to drive the knife into the force field and he got electrocuted. As we know, in the end, Katniss slides the wire off the knife and wraps it around her arrow. Katniss aims it where Beatty would have driven the knife if he'd been able to choose. My bow tilts up at the wavering square, the flaw, the, what did he call it that day? The chink in the armor. I let the arrow fly, see it hit its mark and vanish, pulling the thread of gold behind it. My hair stands on end and the lightning strikes the tree. A flash of white runs up the wire, and for just a moment, the dome bursts into a dazzling blue light. So her arrow went through the force field before the lightning hit. It just mattered that the wire was in contact with it at the time of the lightning strike. It's important that Katniss notes she aimed for the spot Beatty would have hit if he'd been able to choose, signifying something went wrong. He wasn't just foolishly charging at the force field and hoping for the best. He understood how the force field worked better than anyone and planned to hit the weak spot, but wasn't able to due to the chaos. I know this part's different in the movie. Katniss shoots like right up into the sky, but in the book, it doesn't sound like it's very high up. She didn't say she's aiming for the spot Beatty would have hit if he could reach it, just if he'd been able to choose at the time he plunged the knife in. She tilts her arrow up to hit it, but that doesn't mean it was so high that a grown man wouldn't have been able to reach it. I hope this all makes sense. It's tough because a lot of the events happen off the page. The exact sequence of what every person is doing isn't shared, so we need to fill in the blanks a bit.